often you'll buy second-hand tools. There you are. And here's one I had earlier. The second-hand tools, and probably, dare I say, slightly better made than they are today. Bought this brush. In actual fact, I bought 3 of them because I thought they were going to be able to. I was going to be able. You got it as well. I don't believe this. I thought I was going to be able to use this to brush the cinders in the hearth with.
I thought that as well.
Hello and welcome to Talking Dirty episode 21 over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking rather festive in his scarlet. It is Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
And over in Cambridgeshire is an old flatterer friend of mine. She's called Thordis Maria Sophia Friedrichsen, and she's looking absolutely stunning in a piece of fair isle today, I have to say. Did you make that one yourself?
I did. It was the first jumper I ever knitted, and it's got 1,000 mistakes in it, but you can't tell on Zoom.
Well, fair isle has mistakes anyways, and it's all jig-jag. It's fascinating. Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's my show and tell. Joining us for the first time, 2 absolute greats of the horticultural world. We have Rosy and Rob Hardy, our founders, the geniuses behind Hardy's Cottage Garden Plants. Do you have some middle names to share?
Yes, we do. Mine is plain Jane, just Jane, but it's quite amusing because I'm a forces brat and was born in Germany. And my father and mother had decided on Rosemary as my first name, which was absolutely fine. Daddy went off to register my birth at the consulate and they said, you have to give her a middle name. And he went, oh, okay. And the first thing that came into his mind was Jane. He went back and said to mum, and he said, oh, by the way, darling, I had to give her a middle name. And my mum sort of went, oh no, what have you gone and given her? Because their trait was wherever we were born, we were given a middle name that was of that country. So for instance, my brother, who was born in Norway, has got a middle name of Finn, which is a very common name out there. My other brother was born in England, so he's got John. I, on the other hand, mum was thinking, oh no, what German name has she given her? You know, so and no, it was just Jane, and that was it. So that's mine, and that's the story behind it all.
Just think how fascinating, because you could have been a Gretel.
Yeah, I know, or any of the other ones that are there. And you know, mum was having this really horrendous work. Yeah, it wouldn't have worked. Rosemary Jane is fine. I'm quite happy with that.
Rob, what about you?
My middle name is Keith. My mum was one of a farming family of 10. She had 5 brothers and 4 sisters, and her youngest brother was Keith, so I got named after him because she was her favourite.
The baby of the family.
Yeah.
So, Rosy and Rob, I mean, they're names that go very well together, and they've gone together in the world of horticulture for a while now. Surely nobody listening to this podcast or watching it doesn't know about you, but give us a little quick potted history about what you do and how long you've been doing it.
Well, we actually met up in 1985. Rosie is a horticulturalist, went to Writtle College in Essex and did a 3-year HND course in commercial vegetable growing. And the final year, she had to do a 10,000-word thesis, subject, rhubarb. Now, as I tell everybody, I introduce the gardening clubs. I do the introduction for Rosie, and I do try and clarify it by saying that it's the same same soil sciences to grow rhubarb as it is cottage garden perennials, which we grow now. So I said, as long as you understand how soil works and how things grow, then you end up fine. But it usually gets a little bit of a laughter. My background is I was a meat manager for 10 years with Sainsbury's, Waitrose and people like that. And then I set up my own business with the encouragement from Rosie, which didn't quite work out as well as we hoped. And so we were struggling a little bit. This is back in 1985, 86. We're struggling to pay the mortgage and things like that. So Rosie went off to a car boot sale at Ascot Racecourse. She saw plants being sold, came back, dug up the garden and started in car boot sales. So that was back in 1988. The following year, Rosie worked at a farm shop, and she was growing the vegetables and sorting them out and selling them. And she was supplied by a nursery called Lincluden Nursery that used to show conifers at Chelsea. And he suggested that he knew we were growing plants and car boats. Why not start to do the shows? So that's how we actually got into showing, was through being encouraged to go. We couldn't sell from our garden because we were just in a street and it was too difficult. So to actually venture out from car boots, we then went and started the show circuit.
Wow, from car boots to showing.
Yeah.
I think that just illustrates absolutely perfectly how important garden shows and plant fairs are, because it is quite often, I find as a gardener really, that you go to plant fairs and you find what I would term hobby growers. And they don't have premises to sell from, they don't have shops, they don't have a business as such, other than the fact that they go to plant fairs. But it is at those plant fairs that you get the proper people that grow the proper plants, and you find unusual things. And I've always said that, and I think I probably always will. We have a couple of plant fairs in the garden here, a spring one and an autumn one. And I find that, you know, the knowledge of not knowledge, the breadth of the vision of some people, that, I mean, they focus on one plant. It could be something as mad as an epiphyllum, shall we say. You know, there's cacti that grow in rainforests or something like that, but unusual plants that you don't often find in other, shall we say, nurseries. I think that's incredible. And of course, you're well known for your fantastic range of plants, I have to say. And before we get too much underway with Rosie and Rob, I would just like to say I have bought from you on a number of occasions, and I'm going to put a feather in your cap, because I'm going to say that your plants are some of the best and some of the best packed plants that have arrived in my garden. And, you know, I'd just like to say this to alleviate any fears that people have maybe from buying mail order, that, you know, you're not going to get a crumpled up package that you have to revive and put on a hospital ward. Everything arrives so beautifully packed, it can go straight in the garden, and it comes from you looking fabulous, and it arrives with me looking fabulous. So thank you.
Oh, glad. Yeah, no, we've tried really hard to, and we've changed how we package over the last couple of years. And it's making a difference with what we do. And, you know, we want the plants to survive and do well in someone's garden. And if it's not looking good here, we won't sell it. So that's why occasionally people might go, oh, but it's sold out on the website. And we'll go, yes, because we haven't got the correct stock. Either it's not rooted down properly, or for some reason it's not looking so good. And we won't send it out. And I think that's the key. You know, some people, yes, you know, we've had a look at other packaging because we've had to work on how you do packaging. And it's trying to make it so that it's as eco-friendly as possible. And we're gradually getting down to that point whereby at the moment it's the pot and the label. But sending out a plant without its pot on is just too much of a jump, I think, for most gardeners.
Yes.
And I think, so, you know, most people don't mind getting a pot. We're a little bit anti the taupe pots because they're exactly the same plastic as the black pot. They're just a different colour. And in our area, they're not recycled anyway. They may go up the conveyor, which reads them, but they all end up in the same landfill bin and go to landfill. So we'd rather not pay the extra 2 or 3p per pot just to, you know, for this sort of idea that they are more ecologically friendly. They aren't. Just reuse them. We reuse pots on the nursery all the time until they break up, and then we actually have somewhere where we can now take all our broken stuff and take it down the road to Alsford, and there's someone that recycles it there. We don't get paid for it, but I'm not worried about that. As long as they can recycle it, that's the key thing for us.
Most important. Well done.
That's fantastic. I mean, since you started in '88, so much has changed. In terms of kind of plants in particular, what were your kind of big things when you started out?
That's quite an interesting one. I mean, for instance, Euonymus harlequin was one of the big plants that we launched and was the first, real launch of a new plant that we did. Lavatiras were big. They were massive. We did a complete stand of lavatiras, all the different types, annual ones, biennial ones, and all the shrubby ones. And, it was sort of Rob's thing was, everybody's got to have a lavatera in the garden. I haven't sold enough lavatiras yet for every garden to have have one in their garden. And you sort of think, well, actually they are still good plants, but they're not sold as much because I think they got the rust and all of this sort of thing. And then people have changed to other plant material. Right early on we had things like Verbascum Helen Johnson. There are still Verbascums out there, but they've moved on. Colour ranges have changed, heights, shapes, how perennial they are has changed. And I think this is all to do with, some of it is to do with people thinking that every year you've got to have a new set of clothing. Every year you've got to have a new set of plants. It's that same sort of feel. But really, you don't do that with trees and shrubs, so why do it with perennials? You've got to allow things to grow and keep going. I think we have changed because we have made the decision to try and go into species material, not go into all of these big groups which have had a lot of breeding done in them. So we've drawn back from the echinacea and having every single thing there was in the way of echinacea. We've drawn back from heucheras. We just stay with those key plants that do well in our containers in the way that we grow outside, and that we know will be really good in people's gardens. So
can I just say something, Rosie? I think you and Rob have this wonderful knack of drawing back from something before it's completely saturated. Because echinaceas, they don't do well in our gardens, not really. I think they lack that. They lack that. North American prairie, absolutely fine because it's cold one minute and hot the next. That's fine. They'll deal with that, but they don't like this wet in between, these mediocre temperatures. And again, with heucheras, there was two lovely old ladies going around our plant stand in the garden here one day, and one of them turned to the other and said, "Oh, Martha, look at that. You haven't got that one." And I thought, this is like a stamp collection, they're going to have one of every, and they do the same thing with hostas, people do, don't they? So it's very strange, but congratulations for drawing back before it becomes saturated.
We do try, I have to say. But you look back and the old collection used to be hellebores, hardy geraniums, staple plants that are really, really good in the garden and that are traditional plants that grow well in our gardens. And then people have branched out into the other things. And we have a small range of grasses. We have a small range of ferns. Leave that to the specialists who are doing the whole lot. But for people who are wanting to have mixed borders, either in sunny spaces or in shady spaces, we only need to have 5 to 10 to give you that effect. And then go off and find some more if you really want to be, as you say, a stamp collector of all of these plants.
Yeah, but I do think that your stand at the Chelsea Flower Show is always quite breathtaking. But there are always, you just say, let's say cottage garden plants, but there is always something that you single out and probably make a little bit of a feature of that maybe the general gardening public is not quite so familiar with. And there's another knack there, isn't there, you see, of actually drawing gardeners' attentions to a plant. I can't think of one I can't name one exactly. But let's take Frilly Knickers, for instance. That's a...
yeah, that's a later season. So Chelsea, I think what happens there is things like Mathiasella gets brought to attention. It's the way it's used. There is the things like the Amsonias. And so and all of this type of thing. And it probably stems from me having this idea that I've got to put the plants in combination where they would grow in someone's garden. I don't like just doing colour. I have done colour themed displays at Chelsea. It's very, very difficult. It's easier to do a colour themed roundabout at a later show. But even so, I find it incredibly difficult to put something like, say, Lobelia Hadspan's purple next to something like Anthemis, knowing that the Anthemis wants it dry, hot and sunny, and the
Exactly,
Lobelia
yes.
wants it moist. I can't do it. Just because they go colour-wise, I can't do it. So even with those colour-themed displays, I'm still putting little groups together that would be together and then highlighting with other plant material. There are some people, you see, that's where I go out in the garden and I walk down Main Avenue, and I can be so critical walking up and down there and go, well, those wouldn't go together. And I say it to the judges, you know, I'm going to say, how on earth did you get them to have a gold when there is such bad planting combinations there? And they go, Rosie, it's not all about, and I know they only get 20%, I think it is, for the actual planting. Therefore, all of their construction, all of their design can drop them and override them into that. And then it's giving such bad, you know, press, and it's giving people the wrong ideas of what they can do with the planting. Yes, it would be fine if it was an annual planting and you were just putting it all out there, but even some of those would die, you know, if you haven't got the right ones in the right conditions. It does bug me.
One of the other things Rosie does really well at Chelsea is the colour combinations, and she'll put some colour combinations you wouldn't even dream of that actually work. And it's quite interesting to see the public come around, the visitors come around. And we always start off before the show with all the staff that come up to the show. What's the plant that's going to get talked about the most at the show? And you never get it right. It's something that just captures the imagination that we haven't seen. And it's quite amazing how it works. And the other one, of course, Rosie is trying to get everybody to put yellow in the gardens. And she will now explain why.
I love yellow, and so at the moment I've got these beautiful self-seeded marigolds popping up all over the place in my gravel garden. It's about the best bit of gardening I do on the nursery is my gravel garden. So yellow is vibrant, it's lovely, and I keep on saying to people, the first thing when you are being asked by somebody about their garden and whether you can help them to put plants in, you'll say, well, what colours do you like? And nearly always you will get blue, pink, white, cream, maybe a bit of purple. It's nearly always that colour mix. And they'll go, I hate orange and I hate yellow. and you go, right, okay. So do you have daffodils? Yes, we do. Fine. So you don't actually hate yellow. You just don't appreciate yellow that you have. So what I try and do is I will always put together, and any talk I do, I will always put those colours together, and then I will go and put a bit of yellow either at the bottom of the group of plants or above the group of plants. And what happens is people suddenly go, oh, that looks much brighter. And it is, because you just got to have a little bit of yellow there because it draws your eye in. And I say to people, if you go and look at a painting, and if a painting's got yellow, the yellow is put in specific points where the artist wants you to look at that bit, because yellow draws your eye in, it makes you see all of the colours around it. So for instance, if we have got this Iris unguicularis here and you put the yellow over above it, you can now actually see the yellow centres of the actual iris better than when it's away. And it doesn't matter which way round you do it, both of those enhance each other's colours. And that's part of what I do when I'm doing the displays. But yellow is brilliant. You don't have to have masses of it. I mean, I do like a lot of splashy yellow, and you can have soft yellow. So you can use things like Scabiosa ochroleuca, for instance, columbaria ochroleuca, which is a soft, creamy yellow. And you just put it in, and those little buttons just ping out, and they draw your eye into other bits and pieces. Thalictrum flavum glaucum, beautiful, huge, big, tall thing. But if it's against a dark hedge, this is the thing, people love these hedges. So if you've got a yew or laurel hedges, they're quite solid colours. And to break that up, you need a bit of yellow, you need a bit of spikes there. So I do try, and there are a lot of people who I turn to the yellow side. Yeah, definitely.
Which is a kind of a continuation on this podcast. We're always flying the flag for orange. We have often discussed the hatred of orange in the garden, and Alan and I are huge fans of orange. Well, I in particular.
Yeah.
My special bit on that one is 10 years ago, 2010, when they first started the Chelsea Plant of the Year. And we did our first walkthrough display. We were asked by the show manager at the time, Alex Denman, to do a walkthrough display, because one of the problems we were having is, as the displays got bigger, you couldn't really see the plants in the middle of the display. So she said, why don't you do a walkthrough? So you're never more than a couple of meters away from any plant when you walk through it. So we did that. But we also managed to get hold of GM Totally Tangerine to launch at the show. And it went in for Chelsea Plant of the Year. It managed to make it into the top 20, but nothing else. But since then, it's proved its worth as a garden plant. And because it's orange and it's flowering for at least 6 to 8 months of the year, it's brilliant. People have taken on to orange again. Before that, it was very difficult.
It was, yeah.
That is a wonderful plant.
That is a superb plant with a huge garden life as well. I grow it here, and I always try and work in some sort of copper-coloured foliage with it, and that works wonderfully well. Rosie, you're so right about a touch of yellow. It is that pointillist thing of a little blob, and whoa, it lights the whole thing up. I think you showed that admirably with Iris unguicularis there. I mean, I just sort of wanted to go, wow.
It's just because this is what I do when I'm doing the displays, you see. So what most people see the huge, big, bold bit of colour. So with the Iris unguicularis here, I'm going to pour water all over the place. Right, let's do it that way. So with the Iris unguicularis here, most people see the lilac. They don't see the beautiful lines and the white and the yellow that is running down the centre of there. And that's why when you put the yellow next to it, like so, can you see how much that yellow is really highlighted and brought out on the actual iris? You know,
it's like twitching on a light.
It is, absolutely. So when I'm doing the displays, I'm always looking for the soft tone that is extra in another plant, and that is why I can put pinks and oranges together, because when you look at GM Totally Tangerine, it's got a salmony color to the fresh new flowers, so it will then go with something like Verbascum Cotswold Beauty, which is that lovely coppery color. And then because the flowers are virtually the same shape, but because one is in a vertical line and one is in a horizontal, you get that difference of contrast right the way through. So it's using the shapes, using bits of color which will take from one plant and into the other.
Putting the planting displays together sounds like enormous fun, but how, I mean, it must be overwhelming. How on earth long does it take? How do you pick?
Logistics man talking here. What happens is once we've got the plan of the size of the display, Hilary, our nursery manager, has been with us now 26 years, and she came to us a week after Chelsea in '93, and we'd always done fairly small displays. So once we've sorted out what the size of display is, she will work out what plants we've got coming through at that time of year with Rosie, and they'll have the 3 batches. The ones we leave outside, the ones we bring in first, and then another lot we bring in second. So you've got a choice of plant material to use. But what they also do is the planting areas, they know how many crates of plants it will take to fill that area. And if you've got set areas, because Rosie always does right plant, right place. So we've got dry sun, dry shade, damp shade. We will then work out how many crates of each types of plants we need, add a few crates on the top, take them all up to the show, and it's actually put together at the show by eye. There is no plan apart from the trees and the pathways. End of story. The rest of it is done like a painting, and it's done on site.
Oh, proper artist, Rosie.
But we do send material. We know how long material will last inside the pavilion. When it used to be the great marquee and we had all of that canvas and there wasn't as much light, things like say penstemon, for instance, because we used to take those up and we used to get those into flower because we had greenhouses when we were originally doing that lot. They would be white by the end of the show. They'd have lost all of their colour completely. Now in the pavilion with the new structure, it actually is better light for the plant materials. The plant material lasts a bit longer, but we always send foliage plant material up first, things that are going into the shady areas first, and then all of the bright coloured stuff comes later so that it's not there. To put a normal size display up will take 4.5 days. to put the actual plant material into position. It takes a day, maybe a day and a half before that to put all the hardware in, such as the pathways, any of the reels, and the structure, etc. So yes, it's quite a long time, and they're long days. You know, we're there from 6 in the morning till probably, we can only stay till 8, can't we, nowadays? And then on the last day, you're allowed to stay till, well, the following morning if you have to. And we've gone as late as 10 o'clock. And by that time, I can't see to write the labels. I can't remember how to spell the names. And, you know, even with my specs on, I can't read the plant finder to check my spelling. So we give up, and I come back in first thing in the morning and double check that we haven't missed one. And you can guarantee there'll be one plant we always forget to label, or it is incorrectly spelt. My best one was euphoria instead of euphorbia, and no one noticed for a while. So that one got left.
I think I might call them euphorias from now.
Yeah, it's quite funny.
Could we just have a look at Frilly Knickers, because you've been waving them about and saying they're like drumsticks and everything, but I don't think anybody's actually had a proper look at Frilly Knickers. If you sort of could turn them so they face the camera a little bit. Rosie.
There we go. So where are we? I can't see.
Pull it back a bit, over to your left.
Yay!
That's it.
There we go. Frilly Knickers. So that's the front of Frilly Knickers. These are quite well in flower, and the reverse has got a lovely purpley reverse there. Now you can see it much better there. And when it's in tight bud, but the amount of sepals on it, it's absolutely covered in it. So yeah, I mean, I named it Frilly Knickers very tongue-in-cheek, and then one of our people who then takes it on for growing on, because this is a registered plant, said you've got to keep that name, absolutely keep that name. So it's being kept, and it's a beautiful thing. It's an anemone, it's a hybrid, it's a clump former rather than a runner, so that makes a huge amount of difference. Flowers for a great length of time. It's still in flower now, so it started flowering August and it's still in flower now. So, you know, it's a brilliant plant. So it'll work in the smaller gardens, it will work in larger gardens, in clumps, and it's just fun. It's different. It's completely different from all the other, even other double Japanese anemones are not this double. You know, they don't have this amount of layering and the number of sepals that are in there. When it's in tight bud, it's quite purple on the bud as it opens, and then it opens it and becomes more white, depending on how much in the sun it is, how much in the shade it is. So quite an easy plant to place, as long as it isn't in too dry a soil. No, it's absolutely fine.
I bought some from you, and I planted them in semi-shade, which means they get sunlight for part of the day, and they've been flowering. And I am just so pleased with them. They are absolutely wonderful. And I think probably as much you talk about not run, probably an important thing with Japanese anemones, because they can run a bit, but also the shape and size of the plant itself is very useful, because it's not really large, and it's not going to be a nuisance and gut flopping everywhere. It's a splendid plant. Congratulations.
Yeah, it holds itself up really nicely, and it is a good form. So you're not going to have to stake it. It has a reasonable clean leaf base, lovely round leaf base, and then the flowers are held well above it. And you know, with a name like this, Rob's in his elements.
I'm not. So I've missed all the shows this year. We've had 2 shows. And when I did get out there, we had some fun, I promise you.
I'll tell you what, Rob, we've been keeping the name alive, because it's become one of those things that kind of trips off the tongue in a slightly naughty way. You know?
Yes.
Well, this is it. You see, I think, you know, we would sort of pertain towards it, that, you know, you've got Frilly Knickers, you've got Actea, black negligee,
black stockings,
Thalictrum. So you
hot
can
lips,
hot lips. You know, you can have a really saucy border, so you can have it going from sort of sun through to shade. And I think, you know, there are a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, I'll have to mix that." And there's a rose that's got a really hanky panky, I think it's called. So you know, so I'm not just the only one who's sort of flippant about naming plants. There are other people who have got into that as well, and people do love it. We've had some wonderful ladies who've rung up, and you know, little old ladies, and they ring up and say, "I've just got to have a pair of Frilly Knickers, darling," you know. So, and it's so much fun. It's really good. And then you've got other people who are really prudish about it, and you're thinking, "Oh, it's just a bit light-hearted," you know.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing a sexy border at East Ruston Old Vicarage, hopefully. And of course, I mean, frustrating that you haven't been able to get out and enjoy, having a laugh with people about Frilly Knickers this year. I assume there's sort of a moment of hiatus, and hopefully you can just postpone that laugh for 2021.
Yeah, I think Rob's got he's got so many catchphrases, they're all bottled up, and he's going to open up that chest. It's almost like Pandora's box opening up with him coming up with all of these catchphrases and saying to people. But even he's had the one or two places he has been to, and he has said he's had a few given back to him as well. So he's now got those stored in the memory banks. This comes from being a butcher, and I'm sorry, but if you go to a butcher's, they will always be quite cheeky when they're serving you.
No, definitely not.
And so this comes out when he's there at shows. You'll always notice if you go to shows, I'm very much in the background, or I'm not there at all, because I'm the person who goes to the show, put up the displays, and then I disappear and come back home. A little bit of a shrinking violet, really. Whereas Rob, he loves it. He's there, and he's missed so much being out there talking to people. So when he was allowed out for the sort of 2 or 3 times he was allowed out, it was like, oh, he came back really jolly and everything else. So it's his hit, he doesn't need anything else. It's just get out there, talk to people.
Are you even going to disappear, Rosie, when it is because next year's your 25th Chelsea and your final Chelsea?
29.
It's actually the 29th Chelsea, but hopefully.
Hopefully, don't count anything until it's on the stage.
Never count it before it's there. But it would, so it would have been the last Chelsea 2020. We'd made that decision because I find it really, really stressful. It's a very silly time of year to try and put a huge, big herbaceous display on. It's in between seasons. This is the trouble. And you always get a frost before Chelsea Flower Show. You can't guarantee what the weather's going to be. So it's either really, really wet or really, really hot and sunny. And so you can't guarantee what plant material is going to be there. So it's quite difficult.
And the other thing is we've got a very good sponsor in Candide, the gardening app, who have financed it all up till now. We've got trees and shrubs on order at a nursery. They're keeping those ready for us for next year. We've got a beautiful structure being done. That's already been sourced of materials. They're waiting to construct it. So we want to finish it and go off on a bit of a high anyway. We're really looking forward to getting it done next year.
Yeah, he will be there all the time, and I will have to be there all the time. With it being the last one, I will be around because we have to be. I'm not necessarily the best person on the stand because he'll tell you very well, I do get irritated with silly questions, and it's
yay.
Now the best one is, will it grow in a pot?
Oh,
and you've got always. Always. So I can cope with that because I have a little person in the back of my head called the bank manager, and I've got to make this work financially. Now you can have as much fun as you like, but commercially we've got to put some money in the bank to be able to put food on the table. So I'm the other way. I have to make it work financially. So I stick at it. I'll be there 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be still there at 8 o'clock at night, because I do not know which person is going to come up to me and be my best customer that day. And nobody can ever tell you that. So you've got to be there to make sure you do not miss anybody.
Now, talking of brilliant plants, we always like to do a spot of FLOMO on the podcast, mostly because Alan and I go through life wanting everything. Al, unfortunately, has a bit more space than me to actually put those plants in. But FLOMO is that sort of FOMO for anything planty that you've seen and want. You've actually mentioned a while back in this podcast a plant that I've got on my FLOMO list today, Amsonia, which I kind of got sucked into an Amsonia vortex because I saw ciliata on the Hardy's Instagram, and then I found illustris on your website, and particularly with the talk of its autumn colour and these sort of purple pea-like pods. It just looks wonderful in every way. So tell us more about Amsonia.
Oh, Amsonia are brilliant. They're a fabulous plant, and they come in different sizes. So there are some quite short growing ones. Orientalis is probably one of the shortest, about 30 centimetres to 45 centimetres height and spread. Lilac starry 4-petaled flowers, which flower April, May. They are brilliant in shady areas, dry shade. They'll take dappled shade as well. The deer don't eat them. This is one of their big things. They don't get eaten by, the bigger pests, because a lot of people have got these large 4-legged pests that come in, and slightly lower ones as well. So it's always good to know that things won't get chewed off. And then you go on from that. So that makes a nice bushy plant, flowering early, just stays as a lovely bush. And then in the autumn, they just come into their own because they vary in their leaf colour. So some of them will go purples and yellows, some of them will go bright yellow, and nearly all of them, their stem colour changes and it goes to this lovely purple stem colour. And they'll stay like that, and they sort of go, it's like a firework display, and they stay for about 2 weeks with this bright colour, and then suddenly they drop all their leaves at once, and you get left with a halo at the bottom, and the stems then come up. So the stems then stay for another 2 to 3 weeks looking beautiful in this purple or dark colour. And quite often the seed pods will still be there if you haven't collected them too, because if they're the species ones, you can collect them and use the seed. But they're twin pods, so they are quite long, and they're joined at the end and then on a stem, so they look beautiful as well. And they're fabulous plants for people who want something slightly different. Ciliata is slightly more, it's not so dense, it's quite lightweight. And it's a lovely lighter blue. Illustris is taller, very much something which looks like a small willow when it's growing. And that one goes the brightest yellow, and then its stems go purple. So they're great. And they're clump formers. So they're divisible after about 3 to 4 years. Not massively divisible. You can only do them into half. But they're great. They're really good plants for shady areas.
Well, I need to get me some of those, that's for sure.
They're very pretty. They are a lovely thing. So they're wonderful.
With you guys being surrounded by so many plants and able to get hold of stuff, is FLOMO a big part of your life? Do you still find yourself kind of adding things to the wish list?
Yes, we do, and not just in herbaceous ways. I'm at the moment sort of trawling my way through, well, at the moment, Frank P. Matthews' book and also their catalogue for some trees, because we've made some space in the garden. We've just taken down a couple of trees and I want to replace with something. So the reason they've had to come down is they're diseased, and there's no point in leaving something there that's sickly. You're not going to prune it back to life. If it's sickly, it's sickly, so it's gone, and the stumps have got to come out. So that gives me an opportunity to put something else in there. And because we're on shallow chalk where we are here, my list is easier. I sort of go through and I've got to the B. I've only got to B at the moment. I sort of got about 20 plants, and I looked at them, and then I looked and went, not suitable for shallow chalk. So instantly things can disappear off my list very, very quickly. There are a couple of vases that I quite like the look of. 1 or 2 still wouldn't like it, but I could put them in a pot, so that's fine, or a container, whichever we want to call it. And then I really like Crataegus, and of course Crataegus love us here. So I'm looking at Roehampton Red. I really like the idea of that one because of the colour of the foliage when it goes, and I'm thinking it would look fantastic at the front of the house. But what we've removed is something that's flowering, and I quite like that early blossom. So I'm sort of tempted to put 2 in the place where 1 was, and that then will give a little bit of shade, because the area where we're going into is actually quite a sun trap, so I need to be able to put something in there. So I quite like some of the Crataegus and the Malus, because there are some lovely ones out there. And then you get the benefit of also having berry at this time of the year, and that will encourage all the birds in. And I like this idea of whatever goes in has got to have more than one season interest. It's also got to have more than just being a tree there for, it's good to put trees in, but they've got to have, include insect interest, got to include bird interest, all of this, just so that they really work for their space.
Yeah, and their place in the garden.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Rob, you've got some ones that you quite like as well, haven't you?
Which were you thinking of? the one I really like this year and we couldn't show it at Chelsea, we've got a new Thalictrum called Chantilly Lace. And what's the name of the spring one?
Tuberosum.
It's a tuberosum. And it's Liz McGregor up in Scotland who originally came up with Wild Swan. And this is where all the Frilly Knickers and everything have come from. She'd been plant breeding since the 70s. And she's managed to get pink into tuberosum. And it's an absolutely gorgeous one. We had 3 wonderful display plants. And the young plants came through in the middle of summer. We potted them on. They'll be ready for next year. But I love the Thalictrums. Anything from 6 inches high through to the elfin and things like that, again up to 8 feet. And I just think they're wonderful. But that's my little FLOMO.
Thalictrum appreciation. Though how you can say Chantilly Lace without wanting to burst into song, I don't know.
It's very difficult.
Another one to add to our list in our border as well.
Yeah.
If Chantilly Lace ever has a sport, it could be called Pretty Face, couldn't it?
It could, yeah, absolutely. But it flowers and flowers. This is the one thing. It was in flower in April, and would have been on and in peak for Chelsea, and it still will be for next year. But it was still flowering end of June into July. Just so lovely, and sort of knee height. Lovely big soft pink flowers. They're a great plant.
So, Alan, what's your FLOMO?
It's a Cercidophyllum, japonicum, and it's called Morioka Weeping. And it really is one of the most graceful trees I've seen, the way it just kind of flows. It looks like liquid toffee, the way it sort of flows, and then it flows out onto the ground around it as well. It's just a beautiful, beautiful tree. And as well as having just the beauty of the actual physical tree, it gives wonderful autumn color, and like lots of Cercidophyllums, you get that toffee scent as well, which is kind of nice. And in the autumn, when you're walking around, it's slightly damp, and you get this whiff of toffee, and you think, oh, where's that coming from? You know.
Wonderful. We have had one question come in that we can squeeze into the end of this podcast. Feel free to kind of chip in if you want, but you can just sit back and relax now, Rosy and Rob. Most of your hard work is done. But we always encourage viewers and listeners to send in questions. They can comment on the videos, or you can email hello@getgardeningnow.co.uk. And Craig emailed in a picture of a monstera houseplant that he bought a few weeks ago. And Alan, I sent it over to you. Its leaves have started to develop these black blotches with yellowy edges. And he wonders what's happening and what can he do to save his plant?
Well, I think there's a very simple answer to this, but let's talk about monsteras for a little bit, because Monstera deliciosa used to be known as the Swiss cheese plant because it has slits and holes in its leaves, I suppose, much like Emmental or one of those Swiss cheeses. And it is a fantastic houseplant that went out of favor, I suppose, probably early 70s, something like that. But like all good fashion things, it's come around again, and that's now very fashionable. And there is, in actual fact, a variegated form, which is attracting an awful lot of attention today. And I have to say, you see them in posh places for sale at posh prices, shall I say?
Very posh prices.
Yes. But Monstera deliciosa, which I saw, which is what the question was about, is the black patches on the leaves, and that really is caused by the leaves becoming wet. So when you're watering, be a little bit more careful, I think, and don't splash the leaves, because that's what causes it. That's as much as I could see from the photograph. I don't think there are any underlying causes, although of course there could be. I shall leave it there.
With so many plants outside, Rosy and Rob, do you go in for house plants?
I've started to go back into houseplants, yes.
She has a terrible record, though. Since I've known her, she has the ability to kill houseplants quite easily, even ones that are indestructible.
Well, don't worry, I killed a living stone once, so...
That's the best thing for it.
I used to have a monstera, and it lasted. It was a cutting that I took when I was at college in 1981, and it lasted right the way through until we moved from our Camberley house in 1990, and I had to give it away because where we moved to, it wouldn't fit. Friends had it. So it lasted 10 years with me.
Yes, all right.
So that one did quite well. I'm not good with orchids, but I just put it out there. I kill orchids within about 4 weeks.
Was that like a subtle hint? Please stop giving me Phalaenopsis.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for coming and spending, an hour chatting about plants with us and bringing some frilly knickers as well.
That's good. Well, we can finish with some frilly knickers. There you go.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And we'll see you at Chelsea 2021.
Yeah,
Yes,
we will.
certainly will.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to it, Rosie and Rob. All the best. Bye-bye.
Yeah, okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
And here comes Rosie.
I'm trying to get there. Robert's here.
Hello.
Somebody said about gate crushers. I've just arrived.
Do we get 2 for the price of 1?
You do, yes, absolutely.
I'll get a fee.
He's puffing and puffing.
Puffing in the nursery. I've got a pair of Frilly Knickers.
I should put these behind my ears. They make quite good ears.
Yeah. You look like you could do cheerleading with them, to be honest.
Yeah, pom-poms.